Do you want to expand your pitch material beyond just the basic major and minor keys? If so, then stick around because in this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about the Dorian Mode. Let's get into the video. What's happening, everybody? It's Rex Mays from the Mays Music Academy, where I put out instructional videos on music theory, composition, and digital audio production to help musicians just like you level up your music making. Now, if this is your first experience with modes, I encourage you to hit the pause button and go check out my video on the 7 modes of the major scale. You can find the link in the card or in the description below. The Dorian mode gets its name from the ancient Dorian Greeks, who used their own version of modes that they called harmonia or tonos, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the modern usage of the Dorian mode. The term Dorian that we use in modern music originates back in the Middle Ages, where they reappropriated the ancient Greek term in reference to the scale that runs from D to D, all white keys on the keyboard. Now, in modern music theory, the easiest way to think about the Dorian mode is that you start on the second scale degree of a regular major scale. And in C major, all white keys, that corresponds again to D on the keyboard. Another way to look at Dorian mode is that it's the same as the natural minor scale, except that you raise the 6th scale degree up by a half step. So for example, in D natural minor, you expect a B flat on the 6th scale degree, but in D Dorian, you actually see a B natural. An interesting characteristic of the Dorian mode is that it is a symmetric scale because it has the same pattern of whole steps and half steps ascending and descending. The Dorian mode is actually the only mode of the major scale that has this symmetrical pattern of whole steps and half steps. Coincidentally, Dorian mode is also in the exact center of the modes of the major scale in terms of brightness. It is both the 4th brightest and the 4th darkest of the 7 modes. The brightness or darkness of a mode is determined by the quality of the intervals that arise above the tonic scale degree of the mode. For Dorian mode, that collection of intervals is a major 2nd, a minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, and a minor 7th above the tonic scale degree of the mode. Now, in terms of brightness, that Dorian mode has exactly 2 major intervals, 2 minor intervals, and 2 perfect intervals. And it's actually the only mode of the major scale that has an exact balance between those different qualities of intervals. Does that mean that Dorian mode is imbued with some kind of natural mystical power? Not really. But the Dorian mode does have a very unique blend of bright and dark sounds that make it very versatile musically. Dorian is one of the most popular modes, with numerous pieces using it to generate pitch material. Here is just a very small collection of the pieces that utilize Dorian mode. There are many tunes that utilize the Dorian mode melodically. Most of these emphasize the 6th scale degree, which gives Dorian mode its unique quality. When you look at the harmony of the Dorian mode, you can see that the triad qualities resemble natural minor, except for those triads that include the 6th scale degree. It's these triads that are impacted by that raised 6th scale degree that give Dorian mode its unique harmonic quality. The supertonic triad, or 2 chord, which is usually diminished in minor mode, becomes minor, borrowing its quality from the major mode. The subdominant triad, or 4 chord, which is usually minor in the minor mode, becomes major, which again is also borrowed from the major mode. Now the submediant triad, or 6 chord, which is usually major in the minor mode, becomes diminished. However, we don't typically use this diminished 6 chord in real chord progressions. We'll get into more on that later. So let's start with that minor 2 chord, which is heard in Misty Mountains from Peter Jackson's film The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Misty Mountains, which is in G Dorian mode, was composed by Plan 9 and David Long and was integrated into the score for the movie by Howard Shore. The harmony of the piece is a little ambiguous at the beginning because it just goes back and forth between the minor 1 chord and the minor 5 chord, but eventually it gets to that minor 2 chord and lets us know that this piece is for sure in D Dorian.
Far over the misty mountains call to dungeons deep and caverns old. We must away ere break of day
So another cool thing about that minor 2 chord in Dorian is that it allows the composer to use that strong circle of fifths chord progression from 2 to 5 to 1 while maintaining an exclusively minor chord quality. One of the most interesting ways to use the minor 2 chord in Dorian mode is to move from the minor 2 triad up to the major 3 triad, and that's because when you move from 2 to 3 in Dorian, you're moving up by a half step, up from that supertonic up to the mediant scale degree, and that just creates a very striking effect moving from a minor triad up a half step to a major triad. You just heard that minor 2 to major 3 chord progression in Misty Mountains, but you can also hear it in the Song of Storms from the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, which is in D Dorian and was composed by Koji Kondo. The major subdominant triad is used even more than the minor 2 chord to signify that Dorian sound by emphasizing the raised 6th scale degree, which is the third of the 4 chord in Dorian mode. The sound of that subdominant triad in Dorian mode is pretty unique because in both major and minor mode, the subdominant triad follows the quality of the tonic triad. So in Dorian, you have a contrast there between the minor tonic triad and the major subdominant triad, which gives you some interesting contrast that you don't typically hear in normal major or minor key pieces. You can hear that contrast between the minor tonic triad and the major subdominant triad in the Minuet of the Forest and the Serenade of Water, which are also from the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, it's important to note that while some pieces do utilize the pure diatonic Dorian mode, sticking only to the 7 notes of the scale, many pieces do make alterations to the notes, which is especially significant when it enhances the harmonic palette of the piece. One of the most common alterations to the Dorian mode is to raise the 7th scale degree to create the leading tone, which is common with all the modes that have a subtonic, which is when the 7th scale degree falls a whole step below the tonic pitch. You just heard this leading tone alteration in the final cadence of the Song of Storms, where the diatonic C natural 7th scale degree is raised by a half step to a C sharp, making the A chord major, which greatly strengthens the harmonic progression from dominant 5 chord to the tonic 1 chord at the end of the phrase. This leading tone alteration may not be very common in more modern music, but is extremely prevalent in older traditional styles like chant music and folk music styles that really wanted to create that strong upward motion of the leading tone to the tonic and also emphasize that harmonic quality of the dominant 5 chord in the key. Another alteration that is more prominent in modern use of Dorian mode and was also allowed by license in chant music theory was to actually use the lowered 6th scale degree, which alludes directly to natural minor or Aeolian mode. Mixing usage of the lowered and raised 6th scale degree is common both melodically and harmonically in Dorian mode pieces. Melodically, it's very common to use the raised 6th scale degree when you're ascending in your melodic contour, and use the lowered 6th scale degree when you're descending in your melodic contour. The usage of the lowered 6th scale degree has an even bigger impact on the harmony of Dorian mode. As I mentioned earlier, the submediant 6th triad is actually diminished in Dorian mode. Now, this isn't a very useful chord because most modal music avoids those highly dissonant sounds like diminished and augmented triads. Functionally, that diminished 6th triad isn't very useful because it naturally wants to lead up a half step to the major subtonic triad built on the 7th scale degree, which isn't a very strong landing point in a chord progression in any key. This is where the lowered 6th scale degree comes in, because you can use that scale degree to build the major submediant triad, the 6th chord, which is much more stable and a much more versatile chord in building chord progressions. One of the most common uses of that major 6th chord in Dorian mode is to ascend from the major 6 to the major 7 to the minor 1 chord, which is the tonic triad. By passing through that subtonic triad, which uses the lowered 7th scale degree, it really gives this progression a modal flavor in stark contrast to a normal major or minor key, which would use the leading tone, that raised 7th scale degree, to create the dominant 5-chord sound that we hear much more commonly in major and minor keys. That progression from the major 6 to the major 7 to the minor 1 can be heard in a lot of the tunes from the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, including the Minuet of the Forest and the Serenade of Water that I mentioned earlier. Coincidentally, both of these themes use another alteration to the Dorian mode, which is to sub out the minor 1 tonic triad with a major 1 tonic triad, which is actually called a Picardy third. The Picardy third modal mixture can actually be used in any mode that has a minor 1 triad. By using that raised third in the tonic triad, especially at the end of the piece, you kind of create a lift because the listener is expecting that minor quality, which is darker, and you're giving them that brighter major quality instead. Though it's less common than the major submediate 6 chord, you can actually use that lowered 6 scale degree to create the minor subdominant 4 chord, which also alludes to that minor mode. You can hear this striking contrast between the major and the minor versions of the subdominant triad in the main theme from The Last of Us, which is in E Dorian and was composed by Gustavo Santaolalla. Now just remember that the rules of music theory are not set in stone. They just give you a framework to work with. As a composer, you can manipulate this framework to play with your listener's expectations. When you follow the rules, you create a sense of familiarity, but when you break the rules, you can actually create a sense of surprise in your listener. If you want to utilize Dorian mode in your music making, I encourage you to take some more time to listen to and analyze the pieces that I mentioned in this video. The more you familiarize yourself with the unique sound of Dorian mode, the more you're going to pick up on it when you hear it in other pieces as well. As always, I highly recommend that you start using the Dorian mode in your own pieces so that you can start expanding the harmonic and melodic tools that you have in your compositional toolbox. So I have a couple questions for you. First, what's your favorite piece in the Dorian mode? And second, what are some other music theory topics that you would like me to discuss in a future video? Tell me all about it in the comments below. If you got good value out of this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you smash that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Now get out there and start leveling up your music making. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.